After 20 years of silence, CEO hears his ex's voice on the phone and drops everything to run to her. "Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome to Mr. Peter Stories. How are you, my sweet friends? How is your day going today? The day I've been waiting for has finally arrived, our 30th anniversary. Tonight, Binta and I will celebrate not just with a cake, but with a truly romantic evening that's been planned just for us. After all these years, the love we share feels as strong as ever, and tonight I want to make it even more special. We've prepared a cozy setup in our room, with soft candlelight, soothing music, and memories of the beautiful moments we've shared over the years. I can't wait to hold her close, talk about our dreams, and relive the joy of our journey together. It's these intimate moments that make love so magical. I also want to take a moment to thank you all. I came so close to reaching the 10,000 subscriber milestone, but missed it by just 200. Yet, your support and encouragement mean the world to me. Thank you for being part of this family. Tonight's story is a little longer than usual, but I promise it's worth it. A real story from a dear friend that's filled with emotion and inspiration. Before we begin, how did you like the last story? Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Now let's dive into today's story. The crystal chandeliers cast prismatic shadows across the grand ballroom of the Laurent Tower, their light dancing across Amara Thorne's deep brown skin as she stood in quiet observation. Her fingers absently traced the rim of her untouched champagne glass, a habit she'd developed over countless corporate events just like this one. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the air seemed heavy with unspoken words and shifting possibilities. Across the room, her husband of 10 years, Cyrus Laurent, commanded attention with the ease of a symphony conductor. His tall frame, wrapped in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, moved with practiced grace among Seattle's elite. At 42, he had the kind of presence that made people lean in when he spoke, as if drawn by the gravitational pull of his charisma. His salt and pepper hair, more salt than pepper these days, was styled in a way that spoke of both power and effortless sophistication. Amara watched as he charmed a group of potential investors, his hands moving in elegant gestures as he outlined his latest vision. She knew this dance by heart, had watched him perform it countless times as he built Laurent Technologies from a startup in their garage to the multi-billion-dollar empire it was today. She remembered those early days with a clarity that made her heart ache. The late nights hunched over spreadsheets, the way she'd bring him coffee and remind him to eat, the shared dreams whispered in the dark of their first apartment's bedroom. A waiter passed by, offering to refresh her drink. Amara declined with a gentle shake of her head, her collection of delicate gold bracelets catching the light. At 38, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that turned heads in its own right. Her midnight blue gown, custom-made for the evening, draped her figure in a way that spoke of understated elegance rather than obvious allure. She'd chosen it carefully, as she did everything in their public life, mindful of both their image and Cyrus's preferences. "Mrs. Laurent," a familiar voice drew her attention. "You look absolutely stunning tonight." Marcus Chen, their chief financial officer and one of the few people Amara considered a true friend in their corporate circle, approached with a warm smile. His presence was a welcome reprieve from her increasingly melancholic thoughts. "Marcus," she returned his smile, genuine warmth creeping into her voice. "I thought you were in Singapore until next week." "Flew back early for this. Couldn't miss the announcement of our expansion into the Asian market." He studied her face for a moment, his expression shifting to one of concern. "Is everything all right? You seem just tired," she answered quickly, too quickly perhaps. "The new children's wing at the hospital is demanding more of my time than expected." Marcus nodded, but his eyes held a knowing look that made Amara slightly uncomfortable. Had he noticed the changes too, the subtle shift in Cyrus's behavior over the past few months? The late nights that stretched longer than usual, the missed dinners, the distracted responses to her questions. Across the room, a flash of movement caught her eye. Vivian Sinclair, Cyrus's new executive assistant, had just entered the ballroom. At 28, she was a striking presence in a red dress that seemed to have been painted on, her platinum blonde hair arranged in artful waves. Amara watched as the younger woman made her way directly to Cyrus, touching his arm with familiar ease as she leaned in to whisper something in his ear. Something twisted in Amara's stomach. She'd hired Vivian herself, impressed by the woman's credentials and apparent dedication. Now, watching the way Cyrus's face lit up at whatever Vivian was saying, she wondered if that had been her first mistake. "They've been working closely on the Singapore project," Marcus offered, following her gaze. His tone was careful, neutral, but there was something in it that made Amara's chest tighten. "Yes," she replied, her voice equally measured. "Cyrus speaks very highly of her capabilities." The orchestra began a new piece, something slow and vaguely melancholic. Couples moved onto the dance floor, their formal wear creating a swirling kaleidoscope of colors under the chandeliers. Amara remembered their first dance at their wedding, how Cyrus had held her like she was the most precious thing in his world. He'd been so different then, hungry for success, but still soft around the edges, still capable of showing vulnerability. A wave of nausea suddenly washed over her, strong enough to make her sway slightly. Marcus steadied her with a concerned hand on her elbow. "Amara, are you sure you're all right?" She pressed a hand to her stomach, fighting back the queasiness. This was the third time this week she'd felt ill, though she'd attributed it to stress and lack of sleep. Now, standing here watching her husband laugh at something Vivian had said, a different possibility began to form in her mind. "I just need some air," she managed, already moving toward the terrace doors. The spring night air hit her face like a blessing as she stepped outside. The Seattle skyline spread out before her like a carpet of stars. Behind her, the sounds of the party became muted, as if belonging to another world entirely. Amara gripped the stone balustrade, its cool surface anchoring her to reality as her mind raced. When was her last period? She'd been so busy with the hospital's new wing, so preoccupied with the subtle changes in her marriage that she hadn't been keeping track. Could she be? The thought was interrupted by the sound of the terrace door opening and closing. She didn't need to turn to know it was Cyrus. She could identify his footsteps anywhere, even now. "There you are." His voice held a note of irritation that would have been imperceptible to anyone else. "The Nakamuras are asking for you. They want to discuss their contribution to the children's wing." Amara turned slowly, studying her husband's face in the soft lighting from the ballroom. When had the lines around his eyes become so pronounced? When had that spark of excitement he used to get when looking at her been replaced by this kind of detached expectation? "I'll be right there," she promised, straightening her spine and smoothing down her dress. "I just needed a moment." Cyrus frowned slightly, taking in her pale complexion. For a brief moment, something like concern flickered across his features. "Are you feeling unwell?" The question, delivered in that perfectly modulated voice he used for business associates, made something inside her crack a little. There was a time when he would have crossed the space between them immediately, when his hands would have found her face, when his concern would have been immediate and visceral rather than this polite inquiry. "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just needed some fresh air. The champagne went straight to my head." He nodded, already turning back toward the door. "Don't be too long. We need to present a united front tonight." As he disappeared back into the glittering crowd, Amara allowed herself one moment of complete honesty. Something was ending, had been ending for months now, if she was brave enough to admit it. She could feel it in the growing silences between them, in the way he no longer reached for her in the night, in the subtle but unmistakable distance that seemed to expand with each passing day. The irony of their situation wasn't lost on her. From the outside, they appeared to be living a fairy tale. The brilliant, ambitious CEO and his devoted wife. Their life a perfect balance of professional success and philanthropic endeavors. No one would guess that their marriage was slowly crumbling, like a beautiful sandcastle being eroded by an incoming tide. Taking a deep breath, Amara straightened her shoulders and prepared to return to the party. She was a Laurent, after all, at least for now, and Laurence didn't show weakness in public. But as she reached for the door handle, she allowed herself one last thought. If she really was pregnant, how would that change things? Could a child save what was already broken, or would it only complicate the inevitable? The answer, though she didn't know it yet, would change everything. But for now, she simply plastered on her most convincing smile and stepped back into the light, ready to play her part in what would turn out to be one of the last acts of her marriage to Cyrus Laurent. The night stretched on, a glittering facade masking the fractures underneath. Amara moved through it like a ghost in designer clothing, performing her duties as the perfect corporate wife, while her mind spun with possibilities and fears. She watched Cyrus and Vivian from the corner of her eye, noting every small interaction, every shared glance, every moment of connection that seemed a little too intimate for boss and employee. By the time the last guest had departed and the cleaning crew began their quiet work, Amara felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. Cyrus was still engaged in conversation with a few board members, Vivienne hovering at his elbow like a beautiful shadow. As their driver brought the Bentley around, Amara made a decision. Tomorrow she would buy a pregnancy test. Tomorrow she would face whatever truth awaited her. But tonight, watching her husband laugh at something Vivienne had whispered in his ear, she allowed herself to mourn for what was already lost, even if she wasn't ready to admit it yet. The beginning of the end had arrived, dressed in crystal lights and champagne toasts, in red dresses and whispered confidences, in the growing distance between two people who had once promised to love each other forever. And Amara, standing quietly in the eye of the storm, could only watch as everything she had built her life around began to slowly, inexorably fall apart. Chapter 2. Betrayal's Shadow. The first signs of autumn painted Seattle's skyline in shades of amber and gold, but Amara barely noticed the changing seasons. Her attention was fixed on the small plastic stick in her trembling hands, its 2 pink lines confirming what she had suspected for weeks. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind like a bell tolling in an empty cathedral. She sat on the edge of their marble bathtub, the test hidden in her palm as the morning sun streamed through the frosted glass windows of their penthouse bathroom. The irony wasn't lost on her. This should have been a moment of joy, a celebration of new life. Instead, she felt a crushing weight of uncertainty pressing against her chest. The past 3 weeks since the corporate gala had been a study in subtle devastation. Each day brought new evidence of the growing distance between her and Cyrus, pieces of a puzzle she never wanted to solve, coming together with cruel clarity. The late-night calls he took in his study, speaking in hushed tones. The sudden business trips that seemed to multiply on his calendar. The way he no longer sought her out in the evenings, preferring to work late at the office. The lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume on his suits. Sweet, young, nothing like her own signature scent. Rising from the bathtub's edge, Amara caught her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. At 38, she was still striking. Her dark skin glowing, her figure trim despite the barely noticeable swell beginning to form beneath her silk robe. But it was her eyes that held her attention. They carried a shadow of knowledge she couldn't unknow, a pain she couldn't unfeel. The sound of her phone buzzing broke through her reverie. It was Marcus, their CFO, asking if she was free for coffee. Something in his tone suggested this wasn't a social call. "The usual place in an hour," she texted back, already dreading what he might have to say. Dressing carefully in a cream-colored pantsuit that still fit perfectly, Amara tried to ignore the way her hands shook as she fastened her pearl earrings, Cyrus's gift on their 5th anniversary. Each piece of jewelry she owned told a story of their life together, and she wondered absently if she would ever be able to wear any of it again without feeling this ache in her chest. The drive to Pike Place Market was a blur of autumn colors and morning commuters. Their usual cafe, tucked away in a quiet corner of the bustling marketplace, offered a semblance of privacy. Marcus was already waiting at their regular table, 2 steaming cups of coffee before him. As soon as he saw her approach, he stood, his face grave. "I ordered your usual," he said, then paused. "Though perhaps you'd prefer tea." The knowing look in his eyes made Amara's breath catch. Of course he would have noticed. Marcus had known her almost as long as Cyrus had. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly, settling into her chair. "About the pregnancy, or about Vivian?" The name hung in the air between them like smoke. Amara's fingers tightened around the untouched coffee cup, her knuckles whitening with the pressure. "Both, I suppose." Marcus leaned forward, his usually composed features twisted with concern. "The pregnancy I just guessed. You've been avoiding wine at events, and you have that glow about you. As for Vivian... He hesitated, pulling out his phone. "There's something you need to see." The images were crisp, professional, clearly taken by someone who knew what they were doing. Cyrus and Vivian leaving a boutique hotel in downtown Seattle. His hand on the small of her back, intimate and possessive. Another showed them at a private restaurant in Bellevue, their heads close together, sharing what appeared to be a lover's confidence. The timestamps showed a pattern spanning the last 2 months. "I hired someone," Marcus admitted, his voice gentle. "After I noticed certain discrepancies in the expense reports, I needed to protect the company, but more importantly, I needed to protect you." Amara stared at the photos, her world tilting on its axis. She had suspected, had seen the signs, but having the evidence laid bare before her was something else entirely. Each image was a knife to her heart, cutting away at the last threads of denial she had been clinging to. "There's more," Marcus continued reluctantly. "Financial records showing gifts, hotel bookings, private dinners. He's been using his personal accounts, but the pattern is clear. And..." He hesitated again. "There are rumors about a property he's purchased in her name." A property. The word landed like a physical blow. This wasn't just an affair, this was premeditation, planning, a future being built on the ruins of their marriage. "How long?" Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, hollow and distant. "The affair? From what I can tell, it started around the time she was hired. The property was purchased last week. Last week. While she had been overseeing the final details of the children's wing at the hospital, a project she had poured her heart into, partly because it gave her something to focus on besides the growing emptiness of her marriage. Cyrus had been planning a future with another woman. The nausea hit her suddenly, and this time it had nothing to do with morning sickness. Excusing herself, she barely made it to the bathroom in time. As she knelt on the cold tile floor, her body rejecting more than just breakfast, tears finally began to fall. When she returned to the table, Marcus was on the phone, his voice low and urgent. He ended the call as soon as he saw her, concern etched deep in his features. "You should go home," he said softly. "Take some time to think about what you want to do." "But Amara..." He reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Whatever you decide, you're not alone. Remember that." The drive home was a study in autopilot. Amara's mind raced through memories like pages in a photo album. Their first meeting at a charity gala, where Cyrus had been so nervous he'd spilled his drink on her dress. Their wedding day, when he'd promised to love her forever, his voice thick with emotion. The countless small moments that had built their life together, morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, lazy Sunday afternoons reading in their library, the way he used to look at her across crowded rooms, as if she was the only person who mattered. The penthouse was silent when she arrived home, its pristine surfaces gleaming in the late morning light. Everything was exactly as she had left it, and yet nothing would ever be the same. She moved through the spaces like a ghost, touching familiar objects that suddenly felt foreign under her fingers. In their bedroom, her hand brushed against one of Cyrus's suits hanging in the closet. The faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clung to the fabric, sweet, young, nothing like her own signature scent. It was there, standing in their walk-in closet surrounded by the material evidence of their shared life, that the first surge of anger finally broke through her shock. The sound of the front door opening startled her from her thoughts. Cyrus's footsteps echoed through the penthouse, accompanied by the soft click of high heels that definitely didn't belong to her. "Are you sure she won't be home?" Vivian's voice, carrying clearly through the open bedroom door. "She has board meetings at the hospital all day," Cyrus replied, his tone casual, comfortable. "We have time." Amara stepped out of the closet, her heart pounding but her voice steady when she spoke. "Actually, I don't have any meetings today." The look on Cyrus's face would have been almost comical under different circumstances. Shock, giving way to guilt, giving way to a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. Vivian, to her credit, didn't try to hide her presence, standing slightly behind Cyrus in a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Amara," Cyrus started, his tone shifting into something professional, controlled. "This isn't what it looks like." "Isn't it?" She was surprised by how calm she sounded, even as her world crumbled around her. "Because it looks like you brought your mistress to our home, to our bedroom, while wearing the watch I gave you for our 10th anniversary. Her words seemed to hit him like physical blows, each one landing with precision. She watched as he struggled to maintain his composure, to find the words that would explain away the inexplicable. "You're suffocating me," he finally said, the words coming out in a rush. "You've always been so perfect, so controlled. Vivian understands ambition. She pushes me to be better, to want more." The laugh that escaped Amara's lips was bitter, bordering on hysterical. "Pushes you to be better? I pushed you to be better when you were nothing but a dreamer with a start-up in our garage. I pushed you to be better when I worked 2 jobs so you could focus on building your company. I pushed you to be better every single day of our marriage. But I guess I made the mistake of thinking better meant more than just money and power." Vivian stepped forward then, her perfectly made-up face set in an expression of practiced sympathy. "Amara, we never meant to hurt you. These things, they just happen sometimes. People grow apart." "No," Amara cut her off, her voice sharp as a blade. "These things don't just happen. They happen because people make choices. Just like you chose to pursue a married man, and just like he chose to betray every promise he ever made to me." She turned to Cyrus, who was standing there looking lost in his own home, in his own life. "I wonder, did you choose the same hotel room each time, or did you prefer variety? Did you think about me at all while you were planning your future with her, while you were buying property in her name?" The color drained from his face at her words. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that while you were building your little escape plan, you forgot one very important thing." Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, though she stopped herself before the gesture could give away her secret. "You forgot that I'm not just your wife. I'm your partner in everything this company has become. Every contract, every deal, every success has my fingerprints on it too. Are you threatening me? Something shifted in Cyrus's expression then. A flicker of the calculating businessman replacing the guilty husband. No, Amara replied, her voice soft but steel-edged. I'm promising you that when I walk out that door, you're going to remember exactly who I am and what I'm capable of. But for now, she turned, walking back into their bedroom and emerging moments later with a small suitcase she kept packed for business trips. I'm going to leave you to your new life. I hope it's everything you think you deserve. As she moved past them toward the door, Cyrus reached for her arm. Amara, wait. We should talk about this rationally. Think about what you're doing. She looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. The face she had loved for so long, the face she had trusted above all others. I have thought about it. I've thought about nothing else for weeks. And do you know what I've realized? You don't deserve my anger. You don't even deserve my tears. What you deserve is to live with the consequences of your choices. Pulling away from his grip, she walked to the door with her head held high. Just before stepping out, she turned one last time. Oh, and Vivienne? That perfume you're wearing? I bought it for him to give to me last Christmas. You might want to find your own signature scent. Wearing another woman's just seems a bit desperate. The door closed behind her with a quiet click that somehow sounded more final than any slam could have. In the private elevator that would take her away from the life she had built, Amara finally allowed her composure to crack. Tears fell silently as the floors ticked by, each one taking her further from the man she had loved and closer to an uncertain future. But as her hand drifted to her still flat stomach, where new life was growing unbeknownst to their father, she felt something else beneath the pain, a steely determination. She would rebuild, would create something new from the ashes of her marriage. And someday, when the time was right, Cyrus Laurent would understand exactly what he had thrown away. The autumn air hit her face as she stepped out onto the street, carrying with it the promise of change. Behind her, the Laurent Tower rose into the cloudy Seattle sky, its gleaming surfaces no longer representing success and shared dreams, but rather the gilded cage she was finally leaving behind. Ahead of her stretched an unknown path, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe. Chapter 3. Unspoken Secrets. Portland greeted Amara with sheets of relentless rain, as if the city itself was weeping the tears she refused to shed anymore. She had chosen this city carefully, close enough to Seattle to remain connected to her hospital board commitments through video calls, yet far enough away to avoid accidental encounters with her past life. The modest two-bedroom apartment she'd rented in the Pearl District was a far cry from the Laurent penthouse. But as she stood at the window watching the rain paint patterns on the glass, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The first ultrasound appointment had been a week after she left Seattle. Alone in the sterile examination room, Amara had gripped the edges of the medical bed, preparing herself for what she would see. The technician's surprised gasp had made her heart stop for a moment. Mrs. Thorne, the technician had said, using the maiden name Amara had reverted to, would you like to see your babies? Babies, plural. The word had echoed in her mind as she stared at the screen, watching two tiny heartbeats flutter like butterfly wings. Twins. The universe, it seemed, had a peculiar sense of irony. Now 4 months into her pregnancy, Amara stood before the mirror in her new bedroom, her hands cradling the gentle swell of her stomach. The morning sickness had finally begun to subside, replaced by a ravenous hunger that seemed intent on making up for lost time. Her body was changing, softening in some places while growing firmer in others, adapting to nurture the two lives within her. The buzz of her phone interrupted her reflection, Marcus's name flashed on the screen, her one remaining link to her old life, though she'd made him promise not to reveal her location to anyone, especially Cyrus. "The divorce papers have been filed," he said without preamble when she answered. "Cyrus's lawyers are already trying to negotiate terms." Amara moved to sit in the window seat she'd lined with soft cushions, her new favorite spot for watching the city below. "What are they offering?" "10 million, the house in the Hamptons, and a clean break." Marcus's voice carried a note of disgust. "They're trying to paint it as generous." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Generous? I helped build that company from nothing. I was there for every crisis, every triumph, every late-night strategy session. My connections brought in half our initial investors." "I know." Marcus's tone softened. "And so does he. That's why they're pushing for a quick settlement. They're afraid of what might happen if this goes public. The board is already nervous about the potential fallout." Amara's hand drifted to her stomach, a gesture that had become automatic. "Let them sweat. I have no intention of making this easy for him." After ending the call, she pulled out the leather-bound journal she'd started keeping since moving to Portland. In it, she documented everything: her feelings, her fears, her hopes for her unborn children. Someday, she thought, they might want to know their story, and she wanted to tell it honestly, without the bitterness that threatened to color every memory. The next morning brought another challenge, her first day at Portland General Hospital. She'd accepted a position as a pediatric surgeon, a step down from her previous role, but one that would allow her more flexibility once the twins arrived. The familiar antiseptic smell and bustling corridors felt like home in a way her apartment still didn't. "Dr. Thorne." A young resident approached her, clipboard in hand. "We have a 7-year-old with acute appendicitis in OR2. Would you like to take lead?" Pulling her surgical cap on, Amara felt the mantle of her profession settle over her like armor. Here, in the operating room, she wasn't Cyrus Laurent's estranged wife or a woman betrayed. She was simply a surgeon, someone who could make a difference in people's lives. The surgery went smoothly, her hands steady, despite the exhaustion that seemed to be her constant companion these days. As she scrubbed out afterward, she caught her reflection in the metal surface of the sink. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but there was a determination in her gaze that hadn't been there in Seattle. "Beautiful work in there," a voice commented from behind her. Dr. Elena Rhodes, the chief of pediatric surgery, stood in the doorway with an appreciative smile. "I watched from the gallery. Your technique is impeccable." "Thank you," Amara replied, drying her hands. "It feels good to be back in the OR." Elena's warm brown eyes studied her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Join me for lunch?" "The cafeteria's terrible, but I know a place around the corner that makes decent sandwiches." Over lunch, Elena proved to be exactly what Amara needed, a friendly face with no connection to her past life. They talked about cases, hospital politics, and the challenges of being women in their field. It wasn't until their plates were nearly empty that Elena broached the subject of Amara's pregnancy. "I hope you don't mind me asking," she said carefully, "but have you thought about your schedule once the babies arrive? Single-parenting twins while maintaining a surgical career won't be easy." The question caught Amara off guard. She'd been so focused on surviving each day that the practical aspects of her future had remained somewhat abstract. "I'm still figuring things out," she admitted, "but I've always been good at managing impossible situations." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "Well, consider me in your corner. I raised my daughter alone while completing my residency. It's doable, but having a support system is crucial." That evening, as Amara prepared a simple dinner in her new kitchen, she found herself thinking about support systems. In Seattle, she'd had a network of friends and colleagues, all of whom were now inextricably linked to her life with Cyrus. Here in Portland, she was starting from scratch, building not just a new life for herself, but a foundation for her children's future. The twins chose that moment to make their presence known, a flutter of movement that felt like butterfly wings against her ribs. Amara pressed her hand to the spot, tears springing to her eyes at this tangible reminder of why she couldn't allow herself to crumble. A knock at her door startled her from her reverie. Opening it cautiously, she found her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, holding a covered dish. "I made too much soup," the older woman announced, though the deliberate way she'd been leaving extra food for Amara suggested otherwise. A pregnant woman needs proper nutrition. Accepting the dish with genuine gratitude, Amara invited Mrs. Chen in for tea. Over the past months, the widow had appointed herself as Amara's unofficial guardian, regularly checking in with food and gentle company. "You're looking better," Mrs. Chen observed, settling into what had become her usual spot at Amara's small dining table. "More color in your cheeks, but still too thin for twins." Amara smiled, pouring the jasmine tea Mrs. Chen had brought her last week. "The morning sickness is finally easing up. I'm actually able to keep food down now." "Good, good," Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. "Now you can focus on making yourself strong for what's coming. Babies need a mother who can stand tall, even when the wind blows hard." The metaphor struck Amara deeply. She had been so focused on surviving, on putting one foot in front of the other, that she hadn't allowed herself to truly prepare for the future. These children would need more than just her physical presence. They would need her strength, her wisdom, her unshakable love. Later that night, unable to sleep, Amara found herself organizing the small room she designated as the nursery. The walls were still bare, waiting for the soft green paint she'd chosen, a color that would work for either gender, though she already knew she was carrying boys. Their heartbeats, strong and steady during her last ultrasound, seemed to echo in her memory as she folded tiny onesies and arranged them in the dresser she'd bought second-hand. A storm broke over Portland, thunder rolling across the sky like drums announcing nature's fury. Amara stood at the nursery window, watching lightning illuminate the city in brief, brilliant flashes. Each burst of light revealed a little more of the world below, much like how each day revealed a little more of her own strength. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Cyrus's lawyers, again. Another attempt at negotiation, another offer that undervalued everything she had given to their marriage and his company. With steady hands, she deleted the email without reading it fully. Let them wonder about her silence. Let them worry about what she might do with the information she possessed about Laurent Technologies' early days, about the deals that had been made in grey areas of the law. But as she moved to place her phone back on the nightstand, her finger hesitated over her photo gallery. Hidden in a password-protected folder was a single picture, the last one taken of her and Cyrus together at a charity gala just weeks before everything fell apart. They were smiling, his arm around her waist, both of them radiating success and contentment. It was a lie captured in pixels, but she kept it anyway, not for herself, but for the day when her sons might ask about their father. The twins stirred again, more forcefully this time, as if responding to her tumultuous thoughts. Amara moved to the rocking chair she'd placed in the corner of the nursery, her hands automatically finding the spots where she could feel their movements most clearly. "Your story begins with love," she whispered to her unborn sons, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Whatever happened after, whatever choices were made, you were created in love, and you will be raised in love, a love so strong it can overcome betrayal, rebuild from ashes, and turn pain into purpose." The rain continued to fall outside, but here in this small room that would soon be filled with the sounds of new life, Amara finally allowed herself to think about the future. She would give these boys everything, not the material wealth their father could have provided, but something far more valuable, the example of a mother who refused to be broken, who chose dignity over vengeance, who would show them that true strength often comes disguised as gentleness. Tomorrow, she would return to the hospital, don her surgical scrubs, and continue building her new life. She would attend her prenatal appointments, choose names for her sons, and prepare for their arrival with the same meticulous care she brought to everything else in her life. And somewhere in Seattle, Cyrus Laurent would continue living the life he had chosen, unaware that his greatest legacy was growing beneath his estranged wife's heart. The storm began to ease, its fury spending itself against the Portland sky. Amara remained in her rocking chair, one hand on her growing belly, the other holding her journal. On its pages she began to write, "My dearest sons, one day you might ask about the man who gave you his eyes, his smile, his determination. One day you might wonder about the choices that led to our life here, just the three of us against the world. And when that day comes, I promise to tell you everything, not to burden you with old hurts, but to show you that sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow in soil that has been struck by lightning." Outside, the first light of dawn began to paint the sky in shades of hope, and Amara Thorne, no longer defined by her marriage or her losses, continued writing the first chapter of her new story. Their story. Chapter 4. The Price of Pride. Cyrus Laurent stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching Seattle's skyline shimmer in the summer heat. 2 years had passed since Amara's departure, and the empire he'd built seemed to be crumbling beneath his feet like a sandcastle at high tide. The morning's financial reports lay scattered across his desk, each page telling the same story in different ways. Laurent Technologies was in trouble. Mr. Laurent, his new assistant, the third since Vivian's departure, hovered nervously in the doorway. "The board members are assembled in the conference room." He nodded without turning, his reflection in the glass showing a man he barely recognized. The confident swagger that had once defined his presence had diminished, replaced by a weariness that seemed to seep from his very pores. At 44, he looked closer to 50, the stress of the past 2 years etched into every line on his face. The walk to the conference room felt like a journey to his own execution. The board members' faces were grim as he took his seat at the head of the table, their expressions ranging from disappointment to barely concealed anger. "The numbers speak for themselves," Richard Montgomery, the lead director, began without preamble. "Our stock has dropped 30% in the last 18 months. We've lost key contracts to competitors, our innovation pipeline is stagnant, and now we're facing a class action lawsuit from investors." He paused, his next words falling like hammer blows. "The board has lost confidence in your leadership, Cyrus." The words shouldn't have surprised him, but they did. Even as his world had begun to unravel, some part of him had clung to the belief that his position was untouchable. After all, he was Cyrus Laurent. He had built this company from nothing. "If you're suggesting what I think you are," he began, but Richard cut him off. "We're not suggesting anything. We're telling you that effective immediately, you're being placed on administrative leave pending a full review of the company's operations. The board has appointed Marcus Chen as interim CEO. Marcus." The name hit like a physical blow. His former CFO, who had resigned shortly after Amara left, citing ethical concerns about the company's direction. Marcus, who had been one of the few to warn him about the path he was taking. "You can't do this," Cyrus protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "This company exists because of me." "No," another board member spoke up, her voice sharp with disappointment. "This company exists because of teamwork, vision, and trust, all of which began to erode the day Amara left." The mention of his ex-wife's name silenced him more effectively than any argument could have. In the 2 years since she'd walked away, her absence had created a void that seemed to grow larger with each passing day. It wasn't just her personal presence he missed, it was her insight, her ability to see the bigger picture, her way of smoothing rough edges in dealings with partners and investors. The meeting continued around him, details of the transition being discussed as if he wasn't there. His mind drifted to the last time he'd seen Amara, standing in their penthouse with quiet dignity as his world began its slow collapse. Hours later, Cyrus found himself in his private elevator, a box containing his personal effects in his arms. The same elevator where 2 years ago, Amara had made her final descent away from their shared life. The irony wasn't lost on him. His phone buzzed, Vivian's name flashing on the screen. He declined the call, as he had been doing more frequently lately. Their relationship, born in secrecy and passion, had devolved into something toxic and demanding. The young woman who had once seemed so exciting, so full of possibilities, had revealed herself to be calculating and insatiable in her ambitions. The penthouse felt cavernous and cold when he arrived home. Despite Vivian's attempts to redecorate, to erase all traces of Amara's presence, the space still held echoes of his former life. The kitchen where Amara used to cook Sunday brunches remained mostly unused. Neither he nor Vivian cooked. The library, once filled with the comfortable silence of shared reading sessions, had become just another room to avoid. "Darling?" Vivian's voice carried from the bedroom. "Is that you?" He found her sprawled across their bed, shopping bags from luxury boutiques scattered around her like offerings to some materialistic deity. She sat up at his expression, her perfectly made-up face showing a calculating concern that made his stomach turn. "What's wrong?" "You're home early." "The board," he said flatly, dropping his box of belongings onto a chair. "They've put me on administrative leave. Marcus Chen is taking over as interim CEO. He expected shock, perhaps even outrage on his behalf. Instead, he watched as something like fear flickered across Vivian's features before she carefully composed them into a mask of sympathy. "Well," she said slowly, "perhaps this is an opportunity. We could take that trip to the Maldives we've been discussing. Use this time to plan our next moves." "Our next moves," he laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "Vivian, there are no next moves. The company is tanking. The board has effectively fired me, and our personal accounts—" He trailed off, thinking of the latest bank statements he'd been avoiding. "What about our accounts?" Her voice had taken on a sharp edge. "We're bleeding money. You're spending—" He gestured at the shopping bags. "It's not sustainable." "My spending?" She stood now, her designer dress rustling with the movement. "I thought you said money wasn't an issue. You promised me a certain lifestyle, Cyrus." And there it was, the ugly truth he'd been avoiding. While Amara had stood by him when he had nothing but dreams and determination, Vivian had arrived at the peak of his success, expecting only the fruits of labor she hadn't shared. "Things change," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied, her tone turning cold. "They certainly do." Over the next week, Cyrus watched as Vivian's true nature revealed itself fully. The passionate lover who had once made him feel young and powerful transformed into a desperate woman clinging to luxury she felt entitled to. When he finally refused to approve another excessive purchase, she exploded. "You promised me everything," she screamed, throwing a crystal vase against the wall. "You said we would have it all." "I was wrong," he admitted, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. "I was wrong about a lot of things." The divorce papers arrived 3 days later, served alongside headlines announcing Laurent Technologies' stock plummet and his removal as CEO. Vivian's lawyers were aggressive, demanding alimony that would maintain her in the style to which she'd become accustomed. In the end, she walked away with half of what remained of his personal fortune, a fortune already diminished by her excessive spending and the company's downturn. Alone in the penthouse that had once been filled with love and laughter, Cyrus found himself standing in front of the built-in wine cooler, his hand hovering over a bottle of Amara's favorite red wine. She'd left it behind, along with so many other things that had once defined their life together. The memory hit him with unexpected force. Amara, curled up on their terrace sofa, a glass of this same wine in her hand, discussing their dreams for the future. How many times had they sat there together, planning and hoping? How many quiet evenings had they spent building not just a company, but a life? His phone buzzed again. Another article about Laurent Technologies' declining fortunes. The business news was ruthless in its analysis of his fall from grace, with one journalist particularly noting the correlation between the company's downturn and Amara's departure. Sources close to the company suggest that Amara Thorne Laurent's exit marked the beginning of Laurent Technologies' decline. Known for her strategic insight and strong relationships with key investors, her absence left a void that proved impossible to fill. While Cyrus Laurent built the company's foundation, it was perhaps his wife's quiet influence that truly made it soar. The truth of those words hit harder than any board meeting or financial report. In pursuing what he had thought was passion and excitement with Vivian, he had lost not just his wife, but his truest partner, his most loyal supporter, his moral compass. Moving through the penthouse, Cyrus found himself in his home office, surrounded by the trappings of success that now felt hollow. On his desk, buried under papers, was a photo he hadn't been able to bring himself to remove, taken at the opening of their first real office, him and Amara standing before the modest building with matching grins of triumph. They had been so young, so full of hope and determination. He picked up the photo, his fingers tracing Amara's smile. That day, she had worked a double shift at the hospital, then stayed up all night, helping him prepare for their first major pitch meeting. She had believed in him when no one else did, had seen possibility where others saw only risk. The contrast with Vivian was stark and painful. Where Amara had built with him, Vivian had only taken. Where Amara had offered wisdom and support, Vivienne had pushed for more and more, never satisfied, never content. A knock at his door interrupted his musings. His new assistant, he couldn't even remember her name, entered with another stack of papers requiring his attention. Legal documents, financial statements, requests for comments from the press, the detritus of a crumbling empire. "Sir?" She hesitated. "There's also this. It was misplaced during the office transition." She handed him an envelope, slightly yellowed with age. His hands shook as he recognized Amara's handwriting, a letter she must have left behind, one that had somehow been lost in the chaos of their separation. Waiting until he was alone, Cyrus opened the envelope carefully, as if it might contain either salvation or condemnation. "Cyrus, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not because I stopped loving you, I don't think I'll ever manage that, but because sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes we have to lose everything to understand what truly matters. You once told me I was suffocating you, that I didn't understand ambition, but you were wrong. I understood ambition perfectly. I just understood that there are different kinds. I was ambitious for us, for our future, for the life we were building together. You became ambitious for yourself alone, and in doing so, you lost sight of what made us strong. I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope Vivian gives you whatever it is you thought I couldn't. But mostly, I hope you remember who you were before power and success made you forget. The man who used to bring me coffee in the hospital during my overnight shifts, who read business proposals aloud to me while I cooked dinner, who held my hand during thunderstorms and promised we'd face everything together. That man was worth everything. I hope you find him again someday. Amara. The letter slipped from his fingers, landing among the scattered remnants of his pride. Outside his window, Seattle continued its endless dance of light and shadow, indifferent to the drama playing out in the penthouse above. In the gathering dusk, Cyrus Laurent, former CEO, failed husband, man adrift, finally allowed himself to weep for everything he had lost in pursuit of what he had never really wanted. Chapter 5. Growing Shadows. Time flowed like water through Amara's fingers as she watched her sons grow. 19 years passed in a kaleidoscope of first steps, scraped knees, school achievements, and the countless small moments that made up a life rebuilt from ashes. The twins, Kai and River, had grown into young men who carried echoes of their father in their features, but possessed their mother's quiet strength and determination. On a crisp autumn morning in Portland, Amara stood in her kitchen, watching her sons prepare for another day at the university. At 19, they were studies in contrasts despite their identical DNA. Kai, the older by 3 minutes, moved with the precise grace of someone destined for medicine, his dark eyes carrying the same analytical depth that had once drawn her to Cyrus. River, more laid back but equally brilliant, had inherited his father's head for business, though his approach was tempered by an emotional intelligence that Cyrus had never possessed. "Mom, have you seen my anatomy textbook?" Kai called from the living room, his voice carrying the slight edge of stress that appeared before every major exam. "Check under your statistics homework," River replied before Amara could answer, not looking up from the business proposal he was reviewing. "You left it there last night when you were trying to convince me that the human body is more complex than market analytics." Amara smiled, remembering similar discussions between herself and Cyrus in their early years. The boys' different interests had emerged early, Kai performing surgery on his stuffed animals, while River organized elaborate trading systems for Halloween candy. "Your father would be proud," Mrs. Chen had commented once, watching the twins at study. The elderly woman, now in her 80s, remained a constant presence in their lives, though she had long since stopped pretending to make too much food. The thought of Cyrus no longer brought the sharp pain it once had. Over the years, Amara had watched from afar as his empire crumbled, reading about his removal as CEO and subsequent divorce from Vivian. She had protected the boys from those headlines, letting them form their own identities without the shadow of their father's failures. "Mom?" River's voice pulled her from her reverie. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" she asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "That thing where you look at us like you're seeing ghosts," Kai answered, returning to the kitchen with his recovered textbook. "Usually happens when we remind you of him." The perceptiveness of her sons never ceased to amaze her. They had grown up knowing they had a father somewhere, but understanding it was a topic that brought their mother pain. They never pushed, never demanded answers, but their quiet support had been a balm to her soul. "I was just thinking about how proud I am of both of you," she deflected smoothly, years of practice making the motion natural. "How many mothers can say their sons are both top of their class?" It was true. Kai was already being courted by medical schools across the country, his research on innovative surgical techniques drawing attention from prestigious institutions. River, meanwhile, had developed a revolutionary approach to sustainable business practices that had earned him an early internship at one of Portland's leading environmental technology firms. The boys exchanged a look, the kind of wordless communication that had fascinated and sometimes unnerved their teachers over the years. Amara recognized it as the prelude to a serious conversation. "We've been thinking," Kai began carefully, setting his textbook aside, "about applying for positions in Seattle after graduation." The word hung in the air like smoke, heavy with implications. Seattle, the city she had fled, the place where their story had begun and ended. Amara's hands tightened around her coffee cup, but her voice remained steady. "There are excellent opportunities in Seattle," she acknowledged. "Some of the best hospitals in the country, and the tech sector is still strong, despite—" She trailed off, catching herself before mentioning Laurent Technologies' decline. "Despite our father's company's problems," River finished quietly. At her startled look, he smiled sadly. "Mum, we've known for years. It wasn't hard to figure out once we started looking into Seattle's business community. The timeline of Laurent Technologies' rise and fall matches perfectly with our birth and the changes in the company's leadership." Kai moved to stand beside her, his height, so like Cyrus's, making her feel suddenly small. "We didn't say anything because we knew you had your reasons for keeping it quiet, but we're adults now, Mom. We can handle the truth." Amara looked at her sons, these beautiful, brilliant young men she had raised alone, and felt the weight of 19 years of secrets pressing against her chest. They deserved the truth, had earned it through their quiet understanding and unwavering support. Moving to the living room, she retrieved a wooden box from the highest shelf of her bookcase. Inside were the few mementos she had allowed herself to keep, photos from happier days, newspaper clippings about Laurent Technologies' early successes, the single ultrasound image that had revealed she was carrying twins. "Your father," she began, her voice soft but steady, "was the most brilliant man I'd ever met when I first knew him. He had dreams bigger than the sky and the determination to reach them. We built something amazing together, not just his company, but a life we thought would last forever." The twins settled on either side of her on the couch, their presence both comforting and encouraging. She showed them the photos, watching their faces as they saw their father for the first time. Young, ambitious Cyrus, with his arm around her waist, both of them glowing with success and love. "What happened?" River asked, though his tone suggested he had already pieced much of it together. "Success changed him," Amara answered honestly. "Or perhaps it just revealed who he truly was. He forgot what was important, chose power and excitement over loyalty and love. By the time I discovered I was pregnant with you both, our marriage was already crumbling." "Because of Vivienne Sinclair," Kai supplied, his medical training evident in the clinical way he approached even emotional subjects. "We found articles about their marriage and divorce too." Amara nodded, surprised to find that the old pain had dulled to a distant ache. "I left before I started showing. Came to Portland to start over, to give you both a chance at a life untainted by scandal and bitterness." "But you never told him about us," River stated, his business mind calculating the implications. "A decision that probably saved Laurent Technologies from even earlier collapse, considering the potential stock impact of a secret family revelation." "I never told him," Amara confirmed, "not out of spite, but because I wanted you to have the freedom to become your own people, without the weight of his name or the expectations it would bring." Kai picked up one of the photos, studying his father's face with professional detachment. "We have his eyes," he observed, "and River has his smile, though he uses it more kindly, I think." The observation startled a laugh from Amara. "You both have his drive, his intelligence, but you have something he lost along the way. Perspective. The understanding that success means nothing if you sacrifice your soul to achieve it." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the boys absorbing the story of their origin while Amara watched the play of emotions across their faces. Finally, River spoke again. "The Seattle positions," he said carefully. "They're not just random opportunities. I've been offered a junior executive role at a firm that's positioning itself to acquire what's left of Laurent Technologies and Kai. I've been invited to interview for a surgical residency at the hospital where you used to work," Kai finished. "We thought maybe it's time to face the past, not just for us, but for you too, Mum." Amara looked at her sons, seeing in them all the best parts of herself and Cyrus. tempered by wisdom beyond their years. They had grown into men any mother would be proud of, any father would be honored to know. "Your father's company is still there," River continued, pulling out his tablet to show her the latest financial reports. "Struggling, but salvageable with the right leadership. The board is looking for new blood, fresh perspectives. They don't know who I am, but my proposals have caught their attention. And the hospital's pediatric surgery department is being revolutionized," Kai added. "They're implementing some of the techniques I've been researching. It would be a perfect fit." The implications of what they were suggesting washed over Amara like a wave. Seattle. The city of her greatest triumphs and deepest wounds, the place where these beautiful boys had been conceived in love, if not born in it. "You don't have to decide now," River assured her, reaching for her hand. "We just wanted you to know that we're ready, ready to know our father, ready to face whatever comes with that knowledge. But only if you're ready too." Kai took her other hand, completing the circle. "We've had 19 years of being just us, Mum. Maybe it's time to write the next chapter of our story." Amara looked at her sons, these miracle boys who had grown into extraordinary men, and felt something shift in her heart. Perhaps it was time. Time to step out of the shadows of the past, to let her sons claim their heritage, not just the Laurent name, but the truth of their own strength. "Your father's going to be shocked," she said finally, a smile tugging at her lips. 2 brilliant sons he never knew he had, both poised to enter his world at once. 3 brilliant people he lost, River corrected gently. "Don't forget yourself, Mum. You're part of this story too." As the morning sun streamed through the windows of their Portland home, Amara Thorne sat surrounded by the evidence of her past and the promise of her future. Her sons, these beautiful amalgamations of love and loss, of endings and beginnings, were ready to step into the light. The shadows that had haunted their lives for 19 years were finally beginning to recede, making way for whatever new chapter awaited them in Seattle. Whether Cyrus Laurent was ready for that chapter remained to be seen, but Amara knew one thing with certainty. Her sons would face whatever came with the same quiet strength that had carried their mother through 19 years of silence. Chapter 6. The Call. Fate, Amara had learned, had its own timing. She sat in her Portland living room, staring at the genetic test results spread across her coffee table while rain drummed against the windows. 20 years of carefully maintained distance teetered on the edge of collapse, all because of a rare genetic marker that had appeared in her son's blood work. Kai paced the room, his doctor's mind racing through medical implications. The marker affects how certain medications are metabolized. It's not immediately dangerous, but knowing about it could be crucial in an emergency. He paused, looking at his brother. River's reaction to the pre-employment physical proves that. River, still pale from his hospital stay, sat wrapped in a blanket in their mother's favorite armchair. "We need to know if this runs in his family," he said quietly. "It's not just about medical history anymore. This could affect both our careers." The genetic marker had been discovered during Kai's routine medical screening for his residency at Seattle Grace Hospital. Further testing had revealed both twins carried it, but Amara's results showed no trace. The implications were clear. It had to come from their father's side. "Mom," Kai said gently, kneeling beside her chair. "We've respected your silence about Dad for 20 years, but this is different. This is about our health." Amara's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the old address book she'd kept all these years. The leather was worn, the pages yellowed, but Cyrus's number remained unchanged. She'd checked periodically over the years, telling herself it was just in case of emergency. "I have his number," she admitted. "I've always had it, I just never thought I'd have a good enough reason to use it." River moved to sit on the arm of her chair, his business mind already calculating possibilities. We could have our lawyers contact him, or the hospital could make it a formal medical inquiry. No, Amara said firmly. If we're doing this, he deserves to hear my voice. After 20 years, I owe him that much. The twins exchanged glances, their silent communication carrying 2 decades of watching their mother navigate memories of their father. They had pieced together parts of the story over the years. The brilliant businessman who had chosen ambition over love, the betrayal that had sent their mother fleeing to Portland, the empire that had crumbled in her absence. In his downtown Seattle office, Cyrus Laurent sat reviewing the latest disappointing financial reports. At 58, he carried his age with the weight of regret rather than wisdom. The empire he'd sacrificed everything for was slowly crumbling, and the victory he'd once tasted had long since turned to ashes in his mouth. When his phone rang, he almost ignored it. The board meeting had gone poorly, and he had no desire to field more calls about the company's decline. But something, instinct, fate, or perhaps the hand of destiny itself, made him reach for the receiver. "Laurent," he answered, his voice carrying the automatic authority he'd never quite lost. The silence on the other end stretched just long enough to make him consider hanging up. Then, Cyrus. One word. His name spoken in a voice he'd heard in dreams and nightmares for 20 years. A voice that still held the power to stop his world on its axis. In Portland, Amara closed her eyes, drawing strength from her son's presence. Kai had moved to sit on her right, while River remained perched on the chair's arm to her left. Their collective heartbeats seemed to fill the room. Amara. Cyrus's voice cracked on her name, disbelief warring with a sudden, desperate hope. After all this time? Yes, she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. We need to talk. It's important. 20 years, he said, and she could hear the bitterness seeping through. 20 years of silence, and now you need to talk. The twins tensed on either side of her, their protective instincts flaring. Amara reached out, touching each of their hands, drawing strength from the sons who had been her anchor for so long. There's been a medical situation, she said carefully. Nothing immediately life-threatening, she added quickly, hearing his sharp intake of breath. But it involves genetic factors that we need to discuss. In person. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken questions. In his Seattle office, Cyrus had risen from his desk, moving to stand at the window that overlooked the city where their story had begun and ended. Medical situation. His voice had lost its edge of bitterness, replaced by genuine concern. Amara, are you sick? No, she replied softly. But this conversation shouldn't happen over the phone. Can you meet me? In Seattle? Through the phone line, she could hear the subtle sounds of his world shifting, papers being moved, a chair scraping back, the subtle click of a door closing. Name the time and place, he said finally. I'll clear my schedule. They arranged to meet at the Four Seasons, neutral territory that held no memories for either of them. As Amara ended the call, her hands were steady, but her heart raced with the magnitude of what was to come. Mom? Kai's voice was gentle, concerned. Are you okay? She looked at her sons, these beautiful young men who carried their father's features tempered by time and wisdom. In Kai's analytical gaze and River's strategic mind, she saw echoes of Cyrus's brilliance, but softened by the compassion she had tried to instill in them. I'm fine, she assured them, though her voice wavered slightly. But I think it's time for you both to pack. We're going to Seattle. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. River rescheduled his business presentation while Kai arranged coverage for his hospital duties. Mrs. Chen appeared with enough food to feed them for a week, her elderly face creased with concern as she helped them pack. You tell that man, she said firmly, pressing another container of soup into Amara's hands. You tell him what he missed. These boys, she patted River's cheek affectionately, these boys are worth more than any company. In Seattle, Cyrus sat in his penthouse, a glass of untouched scotch before him. Amara's voice echoed in his mind, bringing with it a flood of memories he'd spent years trying to suppress. The way she'd looked on their wedding day, her quiet strength during the company's early struggles, the dignity with which she'd walked away when he'd destroyed everything they'd built together. His phone buzzed with messages from board members, lawyers, people demanding his attention for what remained of his crumbling empire. He ignored them all, his mind fixed on the meeting to come. What medical situation could be so important that Amara would break 20 years of silence? And why did her voice carry an undertone he couldn't quite identify, something that seemed to hint at revelations yet to come? The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke over Seattle, rain painting patterns on his windows that reminded him of tears. Somewhere out there, Amara was preparing to re-enter his life, bringing with her whatever news had prompted this sudden contact. In his heart, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years began to stir. Hope, mingled with fear, seasoned with 2 decades of regret. Tomorrow, he would see her again. Tomorrow, the silence would end. As lightning split the sky over Seattle, 3 hearts in Portland and 1 in Seattle beat with the knowledge that nothing would ever be the same again. The carefully maintained distance of 20 years was about to collapse, bringing with it revelations that would shake the foundations of everything Cyrus Laurent thought he knew about love, loss, and the true meaning of legacy. The twins, watching their mother pack a small overnight bag, exchanged glances heavy with understanding. They had spent their lives protecting her, just as she had protected them. Now they would stand beside her as she faced the past she had fled 2 decades ago. "Whatever happens," River said quietly, "we're in this together." Kai nodded, his medical training evident in the way he monitored their mother's stress levels. "All 3 of us." Amara smiled at her sons, love and pride mixing with anticipation in her chest. 20 years ago, she had left Seattle with nothing but her dignity and the secret of new life growing beneath her heart. Tomorrow, she would return with the living proof of both her greatest loss and her greatest triumph. As the storm raged outside their windows, 3 tickets to Seattle lay on the kitchen counter, physical manifestations of the journey they were about to undertake. In less than 24 hours, Cyrus Laurent would learn that his legacy wasn't just the company he had built and lost, but the 2 remarkable young men who carried his blood and their mother's wisdom. The call that had set everything in motion ended, but its echoes would continue to resonate through their lives, like thunder rolling across the Pacific Northwest sky. The time for silence was over. The time for truth had come. Chapter 7. Recognition. The Seattle morning dawned in shades of steel and silver, the aftermath of the storm lending the city an ethereal quality. Cyrus Laurent stood before the mirror in his penthouse, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. 20 years had etched their story on his face. Deeper lines around his eyes, silver threading through his once dark hair, a heaviness in his shoulders that spoke of burdens carried too long. His phone buzzed with a message from Amara. "Change of plans. Meet me at Seattle Grace Hospital, room 742. It's important." The hospital. His heart stuttered at the implications. Had she downplayed the seriousness of the medical situation? His hand shook slightly as he grabbed his keys, all thoughts of the morning's board meeting forgotten. Across the city, in a private hospital room, Kai sat beside River's bed, monitoring his twins' vital signs with professional detachment that barely masked his personal concern. The genetic marker they'd discovered had triggered an unexpected reaction to the routine pre-employment physical River had undergone that morning, landing him in the hospital instead of the Four Seasons, where they'd planned to meet their father. Your pressure's still elevated, Kai noted, frowning at the monitors. Are you sure you want to do this today? River managed a weak smile, his complexion pale but his determination unchanged. 20 years of waiting, little brother. What's a few more hours? I'm 3 minutes older, Kai corrected automatically, their familiar banter providing comfort in the sterile hospital room. Amara stood by the window, her elegant black dress a stark contrast to the institutional whites and beiges of the hospital room. She'd planned her outfit carefully for their intended meeting at the hotel, wanting to project strength rather than nostalgia. Now, watching her sons support each other as they always had, she wondered if fate hadn't engineered a better reunion than she could have planned. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made them all freeze. Kai moved instinctively closer to his brother's bed, while Amara remained by the window, her silhouette backlit by the morning sun. Cyrus Laurent appeared in the doorway, like a man stepping out of memory. Older, greyer, but still carrying himself with the authority that had once commanded boardrooms. He stopped abruptly at the threshold, his eyes finding Amara first, then sliding to the two young men by the hospital bed. The moment stretched like glass about to shatter. Cyrus stared at Kai, then River, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were telling him. He saw his own eyes looking back at him, his father's jawline, the dimple in River's cheek that matched his own. Amara. His voice cracked on her name, 1,000 questions contained in those 3 syllables. She turned fully to face him, her composure perfect, but her hands clasped tightly together. Hello, Cyrus. Thank you for coming. Mom? River's voice was soft, but carried clearly in the silent room. That single word, Mom, hit Cyrus like a physical blow. His knees weakened, and he grabbed the doorframe for support. 20 years, he whispered, his eyes never leaving the twins. 20 years, and you never— Perhaps we should sit, Amara suggested, her doctor's training taking over as she noticed his pallor. This is a lot to process. Kai had already moved to guide Cyrus to a chair, his medical instincts overriding any personal feelings. Deep breath, sir. Your color's not good. Leather struck Cyrus as darkly funny. This young man, who was clearly his son, addressing him so formally. A laugh that was dangerously close to a sob escaped his lips. How? He managed finally, looking at Amara. When? I was already pregnant when I left, she answered quietly. I found out the week everything fell apart. The timing. It didn't seem right to tell you then. River shifted in his hospital bed, drawing Cyrus's attention. What happened? He asked, noting his son's pale complexion and the medical equipment surrounding him. A genetic marker, Kai explained, slipping into doctor mode, one that affects how certain medications are metabolized. It showed up in our pre-employment screenings. River had an adverse reaction during his physical this morning. Pre-employment? Cyrus latched onto the detail, his business mind trying to find solid ground in the midst of emotional chaos. I was supposed to interview at Laurent Technologies today, River admitted. They don't know who I am, of course. Just another MBA with some innovative ideas for rebuilding struggling companies. The irony wasn't lost on Cyrus, his unknown son, applying to save the company he would have inherited if things had been different. And you? He asked Kai, drinking in the sight of both young men as if afraid they might disappear. Surgical residency at Seattle Grace, Kai replied, following in Mum's footsteps, though with a focus on pediatric neurosurgery. Cyrus turned to Amara, who had moved to stand protectively near her sons. They're brilliant, he said softly. Of course they are. They're yours. They're ours, she corrected gently. Whatever happened between us, they carry both our strengths. The monitors tracking River's vitals beeped, drawing everyone's attention. Kai checked the readings with professional efficiency, adjusting his brother's medication slightly. "The genetic marker," Cyrus said suddenly. "It's from my father's side. The Laurent men have carried it for generations. I should have warned you when you were planning the physical," he added to River. "If I had known." "But you didn't know," River finished, "because we didn't exist for you." The words could have been accusatory, but River's tone held only quiet observation. Still, they hit Cyrus like arrows to the heart. "If I had known," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion, "nothing would have kept me from being part of your lives. Nothing. Not even Vivienne?" The question came from Kai, his professional demeanor cracking slightly to reveal the child who had grown up without a father. Cyrus flinched at the name, at the reminder of his greatest mistake. "Especially not her. What I did to your mother, throwing away our marriage for an illusion of youth and excitement, it's been my life's biggest regret. Finding out that my choices didn't just hurt Amara, but kept me from knowing my own sons." He trailed off, overwhelmed. "We know about Laurent Technologies," River said after a moment. "About what happened after Mom left. About Vivian taking half your fortune in the divorce." "Poetic justice," Cyrus acknowledged with a bitter smile. "I destroyed my marriage for her, and she destroyed what remained of my life for money." "Not your whole life," Amara spoke up. "You still have a legacy, Cyrus. It's just not the one you thought you were building." He looked at his sons, truly looked at them. Kai, with his healer's hands and compassionate eyes. River, whose innovative mind might save the company that should have been his birthright. Both of them carrying his features, but their mother's strength of character. "Tell me everything," he pleaded softly. "Tell me about their first steps, their first words. Tell me who they are." And so, in that hospital room with its rhythmic beeping and antiseptic smell, Amara began to tell the story of their sons. She spoke of Kai's early fascination with her medical textbooks, of River's entrepreneurial schemes in elementary school. She told him about the time they caught chickenpox together at age 6, about their joint science fair victory in 8th grade, about the proud moment when they both graduated as co-valedictorians of their high school class. Cyrus listened with hungry attention, his eyes moving between his sons as if trying to memorize their faces, to see in them the babies and children he had missed. The boys, young men really, added their own perspectives, filling in the gaps in their mother's narrative. As morning stretched into afternoon, nurses came and went, checking River's vitals and adjusting his medications. Kai collaborated with them effortlessly, his future role as a doctor already evident in his confident interactions with the medical staff. "You've done an amazing job with them," Cyrus said quietly to Amara during a lull in the conversation. "They're everything I could have hoped for in sons, and nothing I deserved." "They're not a punishment, Cyrus," she replied, watching as Kai explained something medical to his brother. "They're a gift, one I probably should have shared sooner." "No," he shook his head. "You were right to protect them. The man I was then, I wouldn't have been a good father. I barely managed to be a decent human being." The honesty in his voice made Amara look at him, really look at him, for the first time since he'd entered the room. The arrogant CEO was gone, replaced by someone older, wiser, and infinitely more human. "The genetic marker," River spoke up from his bed. "It's not dangerous long-term, is it?" "No," Cyrus assured him quickly. "Once we know it's there, it's manageable. I'll have my medical records sent over. There's a whole family history that you both should know about." "Family history," Kai repeated thoughtfully. "I suppose we have grandparents we've never met?" "Had," Cyrus corrected gently. "My parents passed away a few years ago. But there are albums, stories, a heritage that belongs to you both. If you're interested in knowing about that side of your family." The twins exchanged one of their wordless looks. Then River spoke for both of them. We'd like that. Not just the medical history, but all of it. We've spent our whole lives knowing only half of who we are. You know the best half, Cyrus said, glancing at Amara, but I'd be honored to share what I can, if you'll let me. The moment was interrupted by River's doctor arriving for rounds. As the medical professional began reviewing charts and asking questions, Cyrus watched in amazement as Kai seamlessly joined the discussion, his medical knowledge evident in the sophisticated questions he posed about his brother's treatment. Standing slightly apart, Amara observed the scene with complex emotions, her sons finally meeting their father, Cyrus humbled and grateful for any small part they might allow him in their lives, the past and present colliding in ways she could never have predicted. "They'll be releasing me tomorrow," River announced after the doctor left. The reaction was severe but short-lived, thankfully. "I'd like—" Cyrus began, then stopped, uncertainty evident in his voice. "That is, if you're all willing. Perhaps we could have dinner tomorrow night. Start getting to know each other properly." The twins looked to their mother, their automatic deference to her feelings touching Cyrus deeply. Amara considered for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Dinner would be good," she agreed. "There's a lot more to discuss, and River needs to rest today." "I'll make reservations," Cyrus offered, standing reluctantly, "and I'll have those medical records sent over right away." He moved toward the door, then turned back. "Thank you," he said softly, "for letting me know them, even if it's 20 years late." As he left the room, his steps slightly unsteady, Amara watched him go with a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite name. The twins waited until his footsteps had faded before speaking. "Well," River said thoughtfully, "he's not quite what I expected." "He's exactly what I expected," Kai countered, "but also completely different." Amara smiled at her son's observations. "People change," she said softly. "Sometimes it takes losing everything to become who you should have been all along." Outside the hospital room, Cyrus Laurent leaned against the wall, his legs finally giving out as the magnitude of what had just happened hit him fully. He had sons, two brilliant, accomplished sons who carried his blood, but, thankfully, their mother's character. Sons who might, if he was very lucky, allow him to be part of their lives going forward. As he pulled out his phone to cancel his meetings for the next week, nothing was more important than this. He caught his reflection in the hospital window. For the first time in 20 years, the man looking back at him didn't fill him with regret. Today, he had been given a chance he never knew he wanted. A possibility of redemption he had never dared to hope for. In room 742, 3 hearts beat in sync, while a fourth, just down the hall, began to remember what it felt like to be whole. Chapter 8. Revelations. The private dining room at Canlis Restaurant floated above Seattle like a glass sanctuary, the city lights twinkling below like earthbound stars. Amara had chosen this venue carefully. Prestigious enough to make Cyrus comfortable, but new enough to hold no memories of their past. The elegant space was neutral territory where they could begin the delicate process of charting their future. River, still somewhat pale from his hospital stay, but insisting on being present, sat beside his brother at the intricately set table. Both young men were dressed impeccably, Kai in a charcoal suit that spoke of medical precision, River in navy that echoed his business aspirations. Watching them, Amara could see how they unconsciously mirrored their father's mannerisms, the way River's hand moved as he spoke, how Kai tilted his head when considering a point. Cyrus hadn't been able to take his eyes off his sons since their arrival, drinking in details he'd missed in the hospital setting, the way Kai's surgeon's hands moved with inherited grace, the slight dimple in River's left cheek when he smiled, a mirror image of his own. 20 years of missed moments seemed to press against his chest with physical weight. Before we begin, Amara spoke, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded hospital boards. There are things we need to discuss, conditions that need to be met if we're going to move forward as a family. The word hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and pain. Cyrus set down his water glass, giving her his complete attention. Of course, anything. First, she began pulling out a carefully prepared document, complete honesty, not just about the past, but going forward, with the boys, with each other, with ourselves. No more secrets, no more hidden agendas, no more convenient omissions. Kai and River exchanged glances, their silent communication speaking volumes about years of wondering, of piecing together fragments of their own history. This means full disclosure about Laurent Technologies, River added, his business acumen showing. All the deals, the decisions, the ethical compromises, everything that led to both the company's rise and its current situation. And complete medical histories, Kai interjected. Not just the genetic marker that brought us here, but everything that might affect future generations. We need to know what to watch for, what to prepare for. Cyrus nodded solemnly. I've already instructed my lawyers and doctors to prepare complete files. No redactions, no omissions. Everything will be available to all of you. Second, Amara continued, her voice softening slightly, therapy. All of us, both individually and as a group. This situation is complex, and we need professional help to navigate it properly. Already arranged, Cyrus said quietly. I spoke with Dr. Helena Martinez this morning. She specializes in family reconciliation and has experience with similar situations. She's willing to coordinate with individual therapists for each of us, ensuring a comprehensive approach to healing. Amara nodded, impressed by his proactive response. Third, a public acknowledgement of past mistakes, not just regarding our marriage, but your business practices as well. The twins deserve to step into their professional lives without shadows of scandal hanging over them. This requirement made Cyrus flinch slightly, but he nodded. I'll have my PR team prepare a statement, full disclosure, complete accountability. River, given your position with the acquisition team, perhaps you'd like to review the business aspects before release. I'd appreciate that, River replied. We need to balance transparency with stability, protect the company's future while acknowledging its past. Fourth, and here Amara's voice took on a passionate edge, a substantial contribution to organizations supporting single parents, not as penance, but as recognition of how many others face similar struggles without the resources I had. I'll establish a foundation, Cyrus replied immediately. Under your direction, if you're willing. Your experience makes you uniquely qualified to understand where support is most needed. The twins watched this exchange with fascination, seeing their parents interact as equals, each word weighted with 2 decades of history. The foundation should include medical scholarships, Kai suggested. I've seen too many talented students give up their dreams of medicine because of financial constraints. And business mentorship programs, River added, focusing on ethical entrepreneurship and sustainable development. We could create something that transforms lives across multiple sectors. And finally, Amara said, meeting Cyrus's eyes directly, time. This isn't something that can be rushed or fixed with grand gestures. Trust has to be rebuilt slowly, carefully. We need to respect each other's boundaries and healing processes. Time, Cyrus repeated softly. The one thing I can never make up for losing. He looked at his sons, emotion making his voice rough. 20 years I can never get back. First steps I never saw. Achievements I never celebrated. Hurts I never helped heal. But we're here now, River spoke up, his business mind seeking solutions rather than dwelling on past losses. And there are practical matters to consider, beyond the emotional ones. Kai nodded, adding, Like the fact that I'm starting my residency here in 2 weeks, and River's already been shortlisted for the executive position at Laurent Technologies' potential buyer. About that, Cyrus straightened slightly, years of business acumen surfacing. River, your proposals for rebuilding the company, they're brilliant. The board doesn't know they're reviewing plans created by my son, but the innovation, the vision, it's exactly what Laurent Technologies needs. River's eyes widened slightly. You've seen my proposals? I'm still on the board, even if I'm not CEO anymore. When the acquisition team brought them forward, I recognized elements of my own early strategies, but refined, modernized. You've taken everything that worked about the company's original vision and updated it for today's market. Pride colored Cyrus's voice. It's what I should have been doing all along, instead of chasing short-term gains. The company's fundamentals are still strong, River replied, unable to resist engaging on a topic he'd studied extensively. The decline wasn't due to flawed products or services, but to leadership decisions that prioritized immediate profits over sustainable growth. The subtle criticism wasn't lost on Cyrus, but he nodded in agreement. Exactly. My choices, both personal and professional, created a cascade of problems that nearly destroyed everything we'd built. Nearly, Kai emphasized, surprising everyone. But not quite. The Laurent name still means something in Seattle. In medicine, I've already had several attendings mention Mom's contributions to the hospital's development. In business, River's ideas are being recognized on their own merit. The foundation is still there, it just needs to be rebuilt properly. As their main courses arrived, the conversation turned to more specific plans for the foundation. Amara outlined her vision for a comprehensive support system for single parents. Not just financial assistance, but access to education, healthcare, and career development opportunities. We could partner with Seattle Grace, Kai suggested, his medical mind working through possibilities. Create a specialized clinic for single-parent families, offering both primary care and preventive medicine, maybe even a childcare center staffed by medical professionals. The business mentorship program could focus on work-from-home opportunities, River added. Help parents build careers that allow them to be present for their children while achieving financial independence. Cyrus listened intently, watching his sons build on their mother's vision with their own expertise and insight. The foundation they were describing would be more than just a charitable organization. It would be a legacy of transformation, turning their family's story of loss and redemption into hope for others. What about the press? River asked suddenly. They'll figure it out eventually. Two young men who look remarkably like Cyrus Laurent suddenly appearing in Seattle's medical and business communities. We control the narrative, Cyrus said firmly. A carefully planned revelation timed to coincide with the Foundation's launch and my public statement. Position it as a story of redemption and second chances rather than scandal and secrets. But first, Amara interjected, we focus on healing our family. The public story can wait until we've had time to strengthen our private bonds. As the evening drew to a close, plans were made for their first therapy session with Dr. Martinez. Dates were set for reviewing foundation proposals and company documents. But more importantly, tentative bridges began to form across the 20-year chasm that had separated father from sons. Standing to leave, River swayed slightly, still not fully recovered from his hospital stay. Both Cyrus and Kai reached to steady him simultaneously, the gesture so identical it made Amara catch her breath. I'm fine, River assured them, but the moment had crystallized something. The undeniable bonds of blood that had survived 20 years of silence. In the restaurant's lobby, Cyrus watched his family prepare to leave, Amara helping River with his coat, Kai checking his brother's color with a doctor's eye. The sight made his heart ache with both joy and regret. Thank you, he said softly to Amara as the boys moved ahead toward the valet. Thank you for raising them to be better men than their father. They're their own men, she replied, but they carry the best of both of us. Maybe that's what these next chapters are about, bringing together all the pieces of who we are, who we were, who we can be. As they parted ways in the Seattle night, 4 hearts beat with the rhythm of possibility. The past couldn't be changed, but the future stretched before them like the city lights below, bright with promise, rich with potential, ready to be written anew. The conditions had been set, the path forward marked out. Now they had only to walk it, step by careful step, together. Chapter 9. Redemption's Path. The morning of the press conference dawned with unusual clarity for Seattle, the sky a pristine blue that seemed to mirror the clarity Cyrus felt in his heart. Over the past 3 months since discovering his sons, he had thrown himself into meeting Amara's conditions with the same determination that had once built Laurent Technologies, but now tempered with wisdom and humility. In the preparation room at the Four Seasons, Cyrus stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie while his sons watched. Kai had taken a rare morning off from his residency, his surgical scrubs replaced by an elegant suit that matched his brother's. River, now officially heading the acquisition team for Laurent Technologies, studied their father with the analytical eyes he'd inherited. The statement's been vetted by PR, River said, his business acumen showing as he reviewed the papers in his hand. But are you sure about the level of disclosure? Some of these admissions could have serious legal implications. That's exactly why it needs to be done, Cyrus replied, meeting his son's gaze in the mirror. Complete honesty was your mother's first condition. We start there. A knock at the door heralded Dr. Martinez's arrival. The family therapist had become an integral part of their journey over the past months, helping them navigate the complex emotions of their situation. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen families heal from seemingly irreparable breaks. "How are we feeling this morning?" she asked, looking at each of them in turn. "Nervous," Kai admitted, his doctor's training making him more comfortable with emotional honesty. "This changes everything, not just for us, but for the hospital, the company, everyone connected to the Laurent name." "Good," Dr. Martinez nodded. "Acknowledging our anxiety is part of facing it. Remember what we discussed in our last session about transparency being the foundation of trust?" Amara arrived next, looking every inch the accomplished surgeon she was, her surgical scrubs replaced by an elegant pantsuit that spoke of both professionalism and authority. Her presence immediately changed the energy in the room, as it had done throughout their marriage. "The press room is full," she reported, moving to help Kai organize the foundation documents. Every major business publication in Seattle, plus medical journals interested in the foundation's healthcare initiatives. Cyrus turned to face his family, the woman he had wronged so deeply, the sons he was just beginning to know, the legacy he had nearly destroyed through his own choices. "I've been preparing for this moment for 20 years, he said quietly. "I just didn't know it." The press conference began precisely on schedule. The conference room at the Four Seasons was filled beyond capacity. Journalists, business reporters, and corporate representatives all eager to hear what Cyrus Laurent had to say. The podium stood ready, backdrop bearing both the Laurent Technologies logo and the newly created Laurent Family Foundation emblem. Cyrus approached the microphone while his family sat in the front row, presenting a united front that immediately set tongues wagging. Among the assembled media, Dr. Martinez had helped them prepare for this moment, coaching them on body language and emotional support. 20 years ago, Cyrus began, his voice steady and clear, "I made a series of choices that nearly destroyed everything of value in my life. Today, I'm here to acknowledge those mistakes and to share some truths that have been too long hidden." The room fell silent as Cyrus detailed his past transgressions, both personal and professional. He spoke of business decisions made for short-term gain rather than sustainable growth, of ethical compromises that had prioritized profit over principle. But most importantly, he spoke of his greatest failure, the destruction of his marriage and the unknown cost of his choices. "What I didn't know then," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, "was that when I betrayed my wife's trust, I wasn't just losing my marriage, I was losing the chance to know my sons." A murmur ran through the crowd as Kai and River stood, moving to join their father at the podium. The resemblance was undeniable. 3 generations of Laurent men standing together for the first time. I'd like to introduce Dr. Kai Laurent Thorne, pediatric neurosurgery resident at Seattle Grace Hospital, and River Laurent Thorne, who many of you know as the architect of Laurent Technologies' upcoming reorganization. My sons, who have achieved extraordinary success through their own merit, guided by their remarkable mother, Dr. Amara Thorne. The cameras flashed frantically as Amara joined them, her presence completing the family picture. Questions erupted from the assembled journalists, but Cyrus held up a hand for silence. Today isn't just about acknowledgement of past wrongs. It's about creating something new from the lessons of the past. I'm pleased to announce the establishment of the Laurent Family Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting single-parent families and promoting ethical business practices. River stepped forward to outline the foundation's business initiatives, his confident presence reminiscent of his father's younger days, but tempered with wisdom beyond his years. He detailed programs for sustainable business development, ethical entrepreneurship training, and support for working parents. Kai followed with the medical programs they would support, specialized healthcare clinics for single-parent families, medical scholarships, and innovative pediatric care initiatives. His passion for healing was evident in every word, matching his mother's dedication to helping others. The Q&A session that followed was intense but controlled. The family handled each question with practiced ease, their months of preparation evident in their coordinated responses. "Dr. Laurent Thorne," a reporter called to Kai, "how does it feel to discover your heir to one of Seattle's most prominent business dynasties?" "I already had the most valuable inheritance possible," Kai replied smoothly. "Our mother's example of strength, integrity, and dedication to helping others. The Laurent name is something we're proud to add to that legacy, but it doesn't define us." "Mr. Laurent," another journalist addressed Cyrus, "there are rumors that your son River's proposals for Laurent Technologies involve significant changes to the corporate structure. Are you concerned about having your company's future in the hands of a son you've just met?" "River's proposals were approved by the board before anyone knew of our relationship," Cyrus answered proudly. "His vision for the company's future is exactly what Laurent Technologies needs, a return to the principles of innovation and integrity that we somehow lost along the way." After the conference, they retreated to the private room where their day had begun. The energy that had carried them through the public appearance began to ebb, leaving them with the quiet reality of what they had just done. "Well," River said, loosening his tie, "that's going to be all over the business news by tonight." "The medical community too," Kai added, checking messages on his phone. "My chief resident already texted asking if this means I'm too rich to finish my residency." "As if Mom would let you quit," River teased, the brothers' easy banter helping to lighten the moment. Dr. Martinez watched their interaction with approval. "This is good," she said quietly to Amara. "They're maintaining their natural dynamic even under pressure. It shows how solid their foundation is." Later that evening, as Seattle's lights began to twinkle against the darkening sky, 4 separate journals were opened in 4 different locations across the city. Each contained reflections on the day, on the journey that had brought them here, on the path that stretched ahead. In his penthouse, Cyrus wrote of pride in his son's achievements and gratitude for the chance to know them. In her new Seattle home, Amara reflected on the strength it took to open old wounds in hope of better healing. In their respective apartments, Kai and River recorded their thoughts on family, legacy, and the delicate balance between past and future. The path to redemption was neither straight nor simple, but with each step, each shared moment, each honest conversation, they moved forward together. The shadows of the past began to recede, making way for the light of new understanding, new connections, new possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more therapy sessions, business decisions, medical emergencies, family dynamics to navigate. But tonight, in four corners of Seattle, four hearts beat with the same rhythm of hope, each one carrying a piece of their shared story, each one contributing to the symphony of their healing. The Laurent name was being redefined, not just as a business empire, but as a testament to the power of forgiveness, the strength of family bonds, and the possibility of redemption. Their story, once marked by betrayal and loss, was becoming something else entirely, a beacon of hope for others who might need to find their way back home. Chapter 10. Building Bridges. 6 months after the press conference, Seattle's autumn painted the city in shades of gold and crimson as the Laurent family gathered for their now-established Sunday dinner. Amara's new home in Madison Park had become the heart of their rebuilding family, its warm spaces filling with the kind of comfortable chaos that only comes from genuine connection. The kitchen buzzed with activity as Cyrus and Kai worked side by side preparing dinner. Over the months, they had discovered a shared love of cooking, Kai approaching it with surgical precision, while Cyrus had developed a more intuitive style during his years of solitude. Tonight, they were attempting a complex French dish from Cyrus's grandmother's recipe book, another piece of family history being passed down. "The key is in the timing," Cyrus explained, demonstrating the proper way to fold the delicate pastry. "Just like in surgery, right?" Kai nodded, his hands already mimicking his father's movements with natural grace. "The precision of cooking is what drew me to it during med school. It was like practicing sutures but with more immediate rewards." In the family room, River sat with Amara, reviewing the latest quarterly reports from Laurent Technologies. The company's turnaround under River's leadership had exceeded all expectations, with stock prices climbing steadily as investors responded to their new direction. "The sustainable energy division is outperforming projections," River explained, his excitement evident as he scrolled through the data on his tablet. "The partnerships we've established with environmental research firms are opening up entirely new markets." Amara listened with pride, remembering how River had shown the same enthusiasm when trading Pokémon cards in elementary school. "Your father was right. You have his business instincts, but you've shaped them into something uniquely your own." The mention of Cyrus no longer brought tension to these conversations. Dr. Martinez's therapy sessions had helped them all navigate the complex emotions of their situation, teaching them to acknowledge past pain while building new connections. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of Marcus Chen and his wife Eleanor. The former CFO had become a regular at these family dinners, his early role in protecting Amara's secrets now transformed into a bridge between past and present. "Something smells amazing," Elena commented as she handed Amara a bottle of wine. "Please tell me Kai and Cyrus are making that chocolate soufflé again." "Better," River called from his spot on the couch. "They're attempting Grand-Mère Laurent's coq au vin en croûte. We may need to order pizza as backup." The easy laughter that followed was a testament to how far they'd come. These dinners had evolved from awkward attempts at connection into genuine family gatherings, each one adding another layer to their growing bonds. As they moved to the dining room, Amara caught herself studying the tableau before her. Cyrus and Kai plating the food with synchronized movements. River and Marcus deep in discussion about market trends. Elena arranging flowers in the centerpiece Cyrus had brought, a family pieced together from fragments of past and present. "Mom," Kai's voice drew her attention. "You've got that look again." "What look?" she asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. "The one that says you're cataloguing memories," River answered, coming to help carry dishes to the table, "like you're making sure everything's real." Cyrus paused in his plating, understanding flickering across his features. He still had moments like that himself, instances when the simple fact of his son's presence seemed almost too precious to be true. "Speaking of memories," he said carefully, "I've been meaning to ask you all something." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box that made Amara's heart skip a beat. The Laurent summer house on San Juan Island. "I've kept it all these years, though I've rarely used it. I thought perhaps for Christmas." The invitation hung in the air, weighted with significance. The summer house had been a source of some of their happiest memories as a couple, and some of Cyrus's darkest days after Amara left. "A family Christmas?" Kai asked, his expression thoughtful. "All of us?" "Marcus and Elena too, if they're willing," Cyrus added quickly. "There's plenty of room and, well, they're part of this family too, in their own way." Marcus smiled, remembering his own role in this story. "We'd be honored, though I expect full documentation of Cyrus attempting to cook Christmas dinner." "Actually," Cyrus opened the velvet box, revealing an antique key. "I thought we might all cook together. Create new traditions while honoring old ones. The kitchen there is big enough for multiple cooks, and there's this bay window where Amara used to—" He trailed off, suddenly uncertain whether the memory was his to share. But Amara finished for him, her voice soft with remembrance. "Where I used to sit and watch the sunset over the water. That window seat was my favorite spot in the whole house." "It still is, exactly as you left it," Cyrus admitted. "I never could bring myself to change anything there. It was like keeping a piece of our better days preserved in amber." The twins exchanged glances, their silent communication carrying 2 decades of watching their mother navigate memories of their father. But Amara's expression held more nostalgia than pain now, the sharp edges of old wounds softened by time and healing. "I think Christmas on the island sounds perfect," she said finally, "though we might want to start planning the menu now, given how tonight's experiment turns out." Right on cue, the timer in the kitchen chimed. Kai and Cyrus rushed to rescue their creation, their matching expressions of concentration drawing laughter from the rest of the family. The meal, when served, was a testament to both ambition and skill, not perfect, perhaps, but made with care and shared with love. Conversation flowed easily, stories of past and present weaving together into the tapestry of their shared life. River shared news of Laurent Technologies' latest environmental initiative, a project that would have seemed impossible under the old corporate culture. Kai spoke of a challenging surgery he'd assisted with, his passion for healing clearly visible as he described the procedure. "I assisted on a similar case once," Amara recalled, "back when Kai was just learning to walk. I remember coming home exhausted but so fulfilled, and finding him operating on his teddy bear with plastic kitchen utensils." "I remember that bear," River laughed. "Poor thing ended up with more stitches than fur by the time Kai was done practicing." Cyrus absorbed these stories, like a man dying of thirst, each small detail of his son's childhood precious to him. But rather than dwelling on what he'd missed, he focused on creating new memories, on being present for the moments happening now. "The Foundation's medical scholarship program launches next month," he mentioned during a lull in conversation. "We've already received hundreds of applications from promising students who couldn't otherwise afford medical school." The business mentorship program too, River added, focusing on ethical entrepreneurship and sustainable development. It's amazing how many young innovators are out there, just needing a chance to prove themselves. Elena raised her glass in a spontaneous toast. To new beginnings and second chances, to family in all its forms. As glasses clinked around the table, Amara found herself studying Cyrus. He had changed so much from the ambitious young man she'd fallen in love with, and even more from the power-hungry CEO who had broken their marriage. This newer version of him, tempered by regret and humbled by loss, showed glimpses of both while being something entirely new. After dinner, they moved to the living room where family photos now lined the walls, a chronicle of 20 years viewed from multiple angles. The twins' childhood achievements were displayed alongside recent family pictures, creating a visual timeline of their journey. "Have you seen this one?" Kai asked his father, pointing to a photograph of him and River at their high school graduation. "Mum almost missed it because of an emergency surgery, but she made it just in time to see us get our diplomas." "Tell him about your speech," River prompted, grinning at the memory. "Our speech," Kai corrected. "We were co-valedictorians, remember?" As the twins shared the story, Amara moved to stand beside Cyrus, both of them watching, their sons with matching expressions of pride. "We did good with them," she said softly, "despite everything." "You did good with them," Cyrus corrected gently. "I'm just grateful for the chance to know them now." The evening wound down slowly, none of them quite ready to end this moment of perfect family harmony. Plans for Christmas were discussed in more detail. Who would bring what dishes, which traditions they wanted to maintain or create anew. "We should invite Mrs. Chen," River suggested suddenly. "She was there for us all those years in Portland. She should be part of this too." Amara smiled, touched by her son's thoughtfulness. "I'll call her tomorrow, though she'll insist on bringing enough food to feed an army." "Perfect," Cyrus declared. "The more the merrier. The house has been too quiet for too long." As their guests prepared to leave, Marcus pulled Cyrus aside for a moment. "You know," he said quietly, "when I helped Amara all those years ago, I never imagined we'd end up here. But watching you now, with your sons, with her, this is the man I always knew you could be." The words hit Cyrus deeply, reminding him of how far he'd come and how far he still had to go. But looking at his family, Kai helping Elena with her coat, River and Amara making plans for next week's dinner, all of them together and whole, he knew that every step of this journey was worth it. Later, after everyone had gone and the dishes were done, Amara found herself alone with Cyrus in the kitchen. They moved around each other with the ease of long practice, putting away leftovers and wiping down counters. "Thank you," he said suddenly, making her pause in her tasks. "For what?" "For this, for allowing me into their lives, into your life, for giving me the chance to try to become someone worthy of this family." Amara studied him for a long moment, seeing the boy she'd fallen in love with, the man who had broken her heart, and the father who was working so hard to make amends, all layered together like geological strata, each layer essential to who he had become. "We're all becoming," she said finally. "That's what family is about, growing together, healing together, building something new from all the pieces of who we are." As Cyrus left that night, the autumn air crisp around him, he felt something settle in his heart. The path ahead was still long, still required careful navigation of complex emotions and delicate relationships. But with each Sunday dinner, each shared story, each small moment of connection, they were building bridges across the chasms of their past, creating something stronger and more beautiful than what had been lost. In 4 corners of Seattle, 4 journals were opened once again, 4 perspectives on the same evening, 4 hearts beating with the same rhythm of hope and healing, 4 pieces of a family portrait slowly coming into focus. The bridges they were building weren't just between people, but between past and present, between loss and recovery, between who they had been and who they were becoming. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for growth and understanding. But tonight, in the quiet aftermath of family dinner, they each felt the solid foundation beneath their feet. A foundation built not just of blood and history, but of choice and forgiveness, of effort and love, of the daily decision to keep building bridges, even when the way seemed dark or difficult. Chapter 11. New Beginnings. The Laurent summer house on San Juan Island glowed with warmth against the winter twilight. Christmas preparations were in full swing, with the extended family scattered throughout the sprawling home. From the kitchen came the sounds of Kai and River debating the proper technique for their grandmother's cookie recipe, while Eleanor and Marcus's laughter drifted from the great room where they were decorating the massive tree. Amara stood in the bay window seat, her old favorite spot, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and rose. 9 months had passed since the twins' existence had been revealed to Cyrus, 9 months of careful healing and gradual reconnection. Now, as the year drew to a close, she found herself reflecting on how much had changed. Hot chocolate? Cyrus's voice came from behind her, carrying echoes of 100 winter evenings they'd shared in this very spot. With the cinnamon stick. Just how you used to like it. She turned to find him holding 2 steaming mugs, his expression soft with memory. Time had been kind to Cyrus. At 58, his silver hair and laugh lines only added to his distinguished appearance. But it was the change in his eyes that struck her most. The arrogance had been replaced by wisdom, the driving ambition tempered by genuine warmth. "You remember," she said softly, accepting the mug. "I remember everything," he replied, gesturing to the window seat. "May I?" She nodded, shifting to make room for him in the space that had once been their favorite spot for watching storms roll in over the water. They sat in comfortable silence, each lost in thoughts of past and present. From the kitchen, River's voice rose in mock outrage. "Kai, you can't approach cookie dough like it's brain surgery. Sometimes you have to go by feel." "There's nothing wrong with precision in baking," Kai defended. "Besides, Grandma's recipe specifically calls for exact measurements." Their brotherly bickering brought smiles to both parents' faces. The twins had taken to calling Cyrus's late mother Grand-mère after discovering her recipe books and journals, another piece of their heritage embraced and honored. "They've settled into their roles beautifully," Amara observed, "both at work and in the family." Cyrus nodded, pride evident in his expression. River's leadership at Laurent Technologies has exceeded everyone's expectations. The board actually asked me yesterday if there were any more secret children they should know about, preferably with his business acumen. "And Kai's latest surgery was featured in the medical journal," Amara added. "His innovative approach to pediatric procedures is drawing attention from hospitals across the country." "They're extraordinary," Cyrus said softly, "just like their mother." The compliment hung in the air between them, weighted with 2 decades of history. In the months since their reunion, they had carefully maintained professional distance, focusing on their sons and the foundation. But lately, something had begun to shift. Dr. Martinez had noticed it in their family therapy sessions, the way their gazes held a moment longer, how they unconsciously oriented toward each other in group settings. The twins had picked up on it too, exchanging knowing glances when their parents fell into old patterns of finishing each other's sentences or anticipating each other's needs. "Do you remember," Cyrus began hesitantly, "the first Christmas we spent here? That terrible storm that knocked out the power?" Amara smiled at the memory. "We ended up cooking everything on the wood stove and eating by candlelight. You were so worried the holiday was ruined. But you said it was perfect, he continued. You said sometimes the best memories come from unexpected moments. Like finding out you have twin sons, 20 years after the fact, she teased gently. His expression grew serious. Amara, these past 9 months, watching you with our boys, seeing the amazing men they've become because of your guidance, I know I can never make up for the time I lost with them, or for how deeply I hurt you. But being here, creating new memories together as a family, it's more than I ever dared to hope for. A crash from the great room interrupted the moment, followed by Marcus's sheepish call. Everything's fine. The ladder just got away from us for a minute. Rising to investigate, Amara and Cyrus found Eleanor and Marcus surrounded by fallen garland and ornaments, both looking slightly guilty. We were trying to reach the top of the tree, Eleanor explained, untangling herself from a string of lights. Here, let me help, Cyrus offered, his height making the task easier. As he reached up to secure the star, Amara found herself studying him, the gentle way he handled the delicate ornaments, how he took care to arrange the lights just so, his patient attention to detail so different from the driven businessman he'd once been. The twins appeared from the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. Their hair was dusted with flour, and River had what looked suspiciously like cookie dough on his cheek. Do we want to know what happened to Grandmère's cookies? Amara asked, raising an eyebrow at her sons. They're perfect, Kai assured her quickly. Or they will be, River amended, once we figure out the optimal oven temperature. You know, Cyrus said thoughtfully, my mother always said the secret wasn't in the temperature or the measurements. It was in making them with love. That's what I've been trying to tell him, River exclaimed, while Kai rolled his eyes good-naturedly. As the family worked together to finish decorating the tree, Amara found herself swept up in the simple joy of the moment. Christmas music played softly in the background. The scent of baking cookies filled the air, and all around her were the people she loved most in the world. Later, after the others had gone to bed, Amara returned to the bay window. The moon had risen, casting a silver path across the water, and snow had begun to fall softly outside. I thought I might find you here. Cyrus's voice came quietly from behind her. He held 2 fresh mugs of hot chocolate and a small wrapped package. What's this? She asked as he joined her in the window seat. Something I've been wanting to give you for a while now, he replied, handing her the package. Open it. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with his familiar handwriting. But unlike the journals he'd shared with the twins, this one was addressed solely to her. I started writing to you the day after you left, he explained softly. Not because I thought you'd ever read it, but because talking to you, even on paper, was the only thing that made sense when my world was falling apart. Amara opened the journal carefully, her fingers tracing words written 2 decades ago. My dearest Amara, another day without you. Another day of realizing how completely I destroyed the most precious thing in my life. Today, I watched the sunset from our favorite spot in the bay window, and for a moment I could almost feel you here beside me. Tears blurred her vision as she looked up at him. Cyrus, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know we've all come so far, and I wouldn't risk damaging the family we're rebuilding. But I wanted you to know that even during my darkest times, my most selfish years, there was always a part of me that remembered what real love felt like. What we had before I lost my way. Outside, the snow fell more heavily, creating a cocoon of white around the warm house. Inside, 2 hearts that had been separately healing for 20 years beat in sync. Do you remember, Amara said softly, what you said to me the first time we came here? Standing in this very spot? Cyrus nodded, his voice rough with emotion. I said that no matter what success or failure lay ahead, as long as I could come home to you, I'd be the richest man alive. You lost sight of that somewhere along the way. I lost sight of everything that mattered, he acknowledged. But seeing our sons, watching you with them, being allowed to be part of this family again, it's taught me what true wealth really means. Amara looked down at the journal in her hands, then back up at the man beside her. The moonlight silvered his hair and softened his features, showing her glimpses of both the young man she'd fallen in love with and the wiser soul he'd become. "I've been thinking," she said carefully, "about what you said in therapy last week, about regret being a teacher if we're brave enough to learn from it. Dr. Martinez would be proud of me actually paying attention in our sessions." He smiled slightly. "The thing is," Amara continued, her voice thoughtful, "watching you with the boys these past months, seeing how deeply you've changed, how hard you've worked to become someone they can be proud of, it's made me realize something." "What's that?" "That maybe some love stories aren't meant to be finished in one chapter. Maybe sometimes they need years of separate growth before the next part can begin." The hope that flared in Cyrus's eyes was tempered by careful restraint. "Amara, I wouldn't presume—" "I'm not presuming anything either," she interrupted gently. "I'm just saying that maybe, like this house, like our family, like everything else we're rebuilding, maybe we could see what might grow from the foundation we once had, not erasing the past, but building something new that honors both where we've been and who we've become." In the quiet warmth of their old favorite spot, surrounded by evidence of family and healing, Cyrus reached out slowly to take her hand. When their fingers intertwined, it felt both familiar and entirely new, like coming home to a place that had been renovated in your absence, different, but somehow even better than before. "Whatever you're willing to share," he said softly, "whatever pace feels right to you, I'm here. Not the man I was, thank God, but someone who finally understands what matters most." From upstairs came the muffled sound of laughter, probably the twins plotting some Christmas surprise, and from the kitchen wafted the scent of cookies, finally baked to perfection. Outside, the snow continued to fall, wrapping their family sanctuary in a blanket of pristine white. And there in the bay window, where their story had seen both its sweetest moments and its bitter end, Amara and Cyrus began to write a new chapter, not with grand gestures or desperate passion, but with the quiet certainty of two people who had learned the true value of love, family, and second chances. Chapter 12. Full Circle. 1 year to the day after their first family Christmas at the summer house, the Laurent estate on San Juan Island was transformed for a very different celebration. White roses and silver ribbons adorned every surface, their elegant simplicity a reflection of the couple they honored. The ceremony would be intimate, family and closest friends only, but its significance resonated far beyond the gathered guests. In the master suite, Amara stood before a full-length mirror while Elena helped arrange her silver-streaked hair. She had chosen a gown in deep midnight blue rather than traditional white, its flowing lines emphasizing her natural elegance. At 58, she wore her age like a crown, each line on her face, telling a story of strength, survival, and ultimately love reclaimed. "Mom!" Kai's voice came from the doorway. Both twins stood there in matching tuxedos, their father's features softened by their mother's grace. "Everyone's ready whenever you are." River stepped forward, holding a small velvet box. "We found this in Dad's study when we were helping him move. He wanted us to give it to you today." Inside was a delicate silver locket she had thought lost 20 years ago. Opening it revealed 2 tiny photos, one of her and Cyrus on their first wedding day, young and full of dreams, the other taken at last year's Christmas celebration, older but infinitely wiser. He had it all along, she whispered, touching the precious memento. Even during the darkest times, River confirmed. He kept it as a reminder of what real love looked like, he said, of what he lost and hoped someday to be worthy of again. Kai produced a second box, this one containing a string of perfectly matched pearls. And these are from us. Something new to go with something old. As her sons helped her fasten the pearls, Amara studied their reflection in the mirror. Her brilliant, beautiful boys who had brought their family full circle. They had grown into such remarkable men, carrying the best of both their parents while blazing their own paths. Downstairs in his old study, Cyrus adjusted his bow tie with trembling fingers. Marcus stood nearby, ready to fulfill his duties as best man. "Nervous?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "Terrified," Cyrus admitted. "Not of marrying her. That's the surest thing I've ever known. But of failing her again, of not being the man she deserves." "That fear," Marcus said wisely, "is exactly why you won't fail. The Cyrus Laurent I knew 20 years ago never doubted himself. This version of you understands the price of pride and the value of humility." A knock at the door revealed River, come to escort his father to the ceremony. The similarities between them were striking. Same height, same bearing, same dimple when they smiled, but River carried himself with a quiet confidence that his father had only found late in life. "Mum's ready," he announced. "And Dad? She's absolutely beautiful." The ceremony would take place in the garden room, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of the Sound. Snow fell softly outside, but inside the space bloomed with white roses and twinkling lights. Their gathered family waited. Elena and Marcus, Mrs. Chen, who had flown in from Portland, key members of the hospital board, and Laurent Technologies, all witnesses to this extraordinary second chance. When Kai and River appeared at the entrance with their mother between them, Cyrus felt his heart stop. Amara seemed to float toward him, her midnight blue gown catching the light like stars on water. The years fell away as he watched her approach, yet every line on her face was precious to him, markers of a life lived with courage and grace. Their vows were both old and new, acknowledging their past while embracing their future. 22 years ago, Cyrus began, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed room, "I made you promises I failed to keep. I confused success with happiness, ambition with fulfillment. But love, true love, gave me a second chance I never deserved. Through our extraordinary sons, through your capacity for forgiveness, through the daily miracle of being allowed back into your life, I've learned what real wealth means." Tears sparkled in Amara's eyes as she responded, "Our love story took the longest road home. But perhaps we needed those years apart to become people capable of the love we share now. You are not the man I first married, and I am not that young woman. We are better, stronger, wiser, and our love is deeper for having survived its winter to bloom again." The exchange of rings carried deeper meaning this time, not just symbols of commitment, but tokens of redemption, of wisdom hard-won, and love carefully rebuilt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was gentle yet profound, carrying echoes of their past passion, tempered by mature understanding. Their sons led the applause, their joy radiating through the room. The celebration that followed was everything they had hoped for, intimate, joyful, filled with love and laughter. Kai and River gave a joint toast that left not a dry eye in the house, speaking of the power of forgiveness and the strength they'd learned from both parents. As evening fell, snow continued to drift past the windows, while inside, the newly reunited family celebrated. Cyrus and Amara shared their first dance to the same song they'd chosen 22 years ago, but this time, the lyrics about lasting love and overcoming obstacles held deeper meaning. Later, they slipped away to their favorite bay window seat, champagne glasses in hand. "Happy?" Cyrus asked softly, though he could see the answer in her eyes. Complete, Amara replied, leaning into him. Look at our family. Kai discussing his latest research with Eleanor, River and Marcus plotting some new business venture, Mrs. Chen teaching everyone her secret cookie recipe. This is what real success looks like. This is what real life looks like, he corrected gently. Messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. From across the room they heard River call out, "Dad, come settle a debate about the company's first merger." "Go on," Amara smiled. "Our son needs your wisdom." "Our sons," Cyrus emphasized, kissing her softly before rising. "The greatest gift you ever gave me, even when I didn't know I had it." As he joined their children, Amara watched from her window seat, her heart full. The snow fell steadily now, wrapping their family sanctuary in pristine white, while inside, love bloomed like roses in winter. Their story hadn't ended with betrayal and loss. It had simply taken a 20-year intermission before its most beautiful chapter could begin. Now, surrounded by the family they'd built and rebuilt, their love had finally come full circle, stronger for its scars, wiser for its wounds, and more precious for having been lost and found again. Outside, the snow continued to fall on San Juan Island, each flake a tiny miracle of second chances. Inside, two hearts that had learned to beat separately found their shared rhythm once more, while their sons, the living proof of love's endurance, celebrated the family that had taken the longest road to find its way home. Subscribe if you enjoyed